Hi there, this is Nicholas Casimir, and I'm here with famed author Christopher Rice with his new novel, The Heavens Rise. Now, to start off, this is your sixth book, and it's a bit of a departure.
A bit, yeah, it's supernatural. I had never done supernatural before. It's still dark suspense, it's still very character-driven. It's got a southern setting, which I've done once before, believe it or not, despite the family associations with the Rice last name. I've only set one other book in New Orleans out of the six. So all of that is familiar, but yeah, no, so it was the first time I did a supernatural thriller, and I was strongly discouraged from doing one by people in publishing for years. They said, if you thought the comparisons were bad before, just wait until you do something supernatural. And there haven't really been any. It's a different aesthetic than the Anne Rice aesthetic. It's gritty, it's more influenced by mystery and crime fiction, but it's also influenced by a lot of contemporary supernatural writers as well, like the obvious ones, Stephen King and Dean Koontz and all those guys that I read growing up.
The book flips back and forth between 2005 and the present date, correct?
Yes, it does.
And it's very specifically set in the South. You, of course, lived in New Orleans, but you didn't grow up in New Orleans necessarily, correct? Am I mistaken?
I basically grew up in New Orleans.
Did you?
We moved there when I was 10 years old, and I was born in Northern California, and we left the Bay Area when I was 10. That was 1988.
Right.
And I remember we went from living in the Castro district to arriving in uptown New Orleans just in time for the 1988 Republican Convention. So it was quite a culture shock.
Wow.
Going from one to the other. New Orleans has a reputation for being a very excessive and eccentric city, and it is in various respects, but the environment that I moved into, particularly in comparison to the one I was coming from, was very socially conservative. It was a culture shock, but there were a lot of good things that came out of that too. The good things are probably in this book, ironically enough, even though this book is a dark horror thriller. The first book I wrote, A Density of Souls, was very much an angry young man's book. It was there were some people I wanted to get back at. There just were.
Because you were an angry young man.
Because I was an angry gay young man, and I was a closeted gay young man. I wasn't like these kids on Glee who come out at the age of 15 and 16. I was struggling with it greatly. I was really resistant to it up until I turned 18 and met my first boyfriend, who I was with for all of 2 weeks. So all that energy went into that first book, and it left me with a desire to set another book in New Orleans that had a kinder, gentler perspective on the people who live in New Orleans.
Because I was curious, when you grew up in the Castro, and you said in the 80s, that must have been really fun and also really, really strange, because that was when the AIDS crisis sort of came to be.
It was bad.
Right.
It got really bad really quickly. And only later did I realize that I think it was almost impossible for Mom and Dad to stay there because they had lost their daughter, my sister Michelle, to leukemia years before. And the pallor of illness that came over the whole community was probably more than they could handle. I'm thinking for them on that. But it was one of those things you couldn't, they didn't keep stuff from me as a child. They were very, they treated me as somebody who had adult sensibilities and who could handle all that stuff. But even if they hadn't been, there was no hiding it. Like the lines going out the doors at the pharmacy, the grown men having to buy diapers, it was just, it came like a thunderbolt in that neighborhood. And I just remember stores closing. I remember stores that were there, and they would have to close because the owner had just died.
When you came to realize that you might be gay, when you were a teenager, did you associate homosexuality with that period of, what I mean, watching this unfold, this disease strike the gay community, So you were a kid then, and here you are as a teenager coming to realize you were also gay.
Yeah.
So was that part of the confusion and sort of resentment of being gay?
It absolutely was, and I think honestly it was something that I had in common with men in my specific age group, because we went on a trip to Italy after I graduated from high school, which was wonderful. It was like a graduation gift, and my whole family went, and I remember being in the airport coming back and opening a copy of the New York Times, and I think the headline was something like, "New class of drugs changes face of AIDS epidemic." And these were protease inhibitors. But at this point I had already been going out to gay bars that I wasn't old enough to get into. And I had already kind of entered a community where it still felt like a death sentence. And it changed right as I came out of the closet. And so the emotional scars were still out there, the sense of grief was still out there, the uncertainty that protease inhibitors were really what they claimed to be was still out there. We were terrified of getting sick. We were terrified of getting sick from kissing. And it took me years to shake that off, to get a more reality-based and informed approach towards sex and safe sex.
Well, let me ask you this, because you mentioned a little earlier on that you're a gay writer, and people don't just think of you as a writer; think of you as a gay writer. Does that irk you?
I don't. This question is endless. Like, I think it irks me to the degree that somebody is going to assume that your work is only accessible or relatable to gay people.
Right.
The idea that the audience is only going to be this one group of people for your book, I really believe that idea is being eroded by the digital world that we're all now living in. That we're finding that a lot of people like to read a lot of different things. So I hope it will ultimately make those labels go away, because there was a time when being a gay writer really, it meant something. It meant you were writing about a world that people didn't know about, that they had ignored, that they had dismissed. You were writing about people who had maybe died of AIDS. You were writing about communities that were under a serious and immediate threat. Now, it's almost like the nobility has been taken out of the term, not by any one individual or their actions, but by time itself, by the sort of march of history. Now, does it just mean you have a gay character in your book? Well, we have straight writers who put gay characters in their books all the time. So it's really, I don't really know what to make of it. What bothers me about it is the implication that I'm only writing stuff that's accessible to one group of people. I think that's insulting.
It's interesting because I was reading the book and I thought, oh, this is a very, don't think it's the wrong way, straight book. There was some very hot, kind of necking and sexual foreplay and whatnot, and then
with the straight people.
With the straight people, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, and then eventually one of the characters, Ben, I believe is his name.
Yes, Ben Boyard. Yeah,
is actually a gay young man.
Right. Yeah.
So, first of all, my first question is, was it challenging to write the straight love scenes, or was it just as an author you're just able to do that?
I have some experience with the straight side of things that I think can go into that. It's not necessarily challenging. I'll tell you what's challenging as a writer is to have my interest as a writer held by a whole story in which there is nothing gay at all. And I think what was interesting about this book was I have put books out there that I thought were not very gay, and then people have said, this is a gay book. The Moonlit Earth, my last novel, I thought was the least gay thing I had ever written. It was about a young woman whose flight attendant brother is accused of being a terrorist. Flight attendant brother happens to be gay, and he's involved with other gay characters, but everybody reacted like it was this huge gay book that I had written. And so I was surprised with this book when people were like, wow, it's very straight, because Ben really is the character that tells you the whole story. And his personal life got a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger as the book went on, because what I was committed to was this idea of it is possible to write a major gay character who isn't looking for love, or who isn't trying to get laid. It's possible to write a gay character who is completely emotionally leveled by the disappearance of his straight female best friend, and to have that be his defining characteristic.
Your mother is Anne Rice.
Yes.
And you are on a book tour together to some degree?
Yes, we are.
I can't imagine myself on the road with my mother. Like, what is that like? I mean, I'm sure she's a great writer. I mean, it's different from you being on the road with another writer. It's one thing to have your mother on the road with you and sitting beside you, and also having to,
Well, we've traveled before.
You're adults now.
We are. We're adults now. We've traveled before, and the thing about the Rice family is that we have always been, even when my father was alive, it's like, let's have dinner and then let's go to our rooms and think. We have our alone time, and I think that is crucial. I've heard it's crucial for long-term marriages, and I think it's crucial for going on book tour with your mother. Everyone needs their alone time.
Does she drive you crazy sometimes?
Oh yeah, and I drive her crazy too.
How do you drive her crazy?
I have an internet radio show
Yes.
called The Dinner Party Show, which I started with my best friend Eric Shaw Quinn. And we printed up some bookmarks. And so the logistics of who's getting a bookmark and who's handing them out and how they're going to be, I think I drove her crazy every night because I would change the plan. I would be like, well, this week maybe we should have you hand out the bookmarks and they should be at this side of the table. She was like, Christopher, enough about the bookmarks. So that was fun, And then she's always getting sick, always. Every day on the book tour, I think I'm getting sick. It's like, you're fine. You're fine. You're not fooling anyone because you look amazing. You're 72, but you look 40. And, she's had health problems over the years, but she's managed to hang in this whole book tour in tip-top shape. So I'm happy for her.
And your mother was obviously always supportive, right?
Yeah, she was, but she was also very afraid. She had lost many good friends. John Preston, the writer, was a good friend of hers. She'd lost editors. She'd lost people she'd worked with in publishing. And when I told her, I mean, I think it's just now not being the first thing parents think of when their child comes out to them. It just now, like we're just reaching that place.
Well, the heavens rise. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You should be very proud.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.